I just felt like chopping her up and eating her, so I went to get a knife. Then I caught a piece of her arm and her left breast, which I cooked in the kitchen. Then I ate her breast. These few sentences changed the meaning of a psychopath for most Indians. This is an investigation of corruption, murder, necrophilia, and cannibalism. This is the Nithari case. 2005, a day that Jabulal would never forget. Working as a dobai, or laundryman, on the outskirts of Delhi in a small village called Nithari, Jabu barely made enough to feed his children. But what he lacked in money, he gained in relationships. Jabu's family was happy and bustling, but little did he know his family would soon change forever. It was almost 9 in the morning when Lal's wife, Nina, asked their 10-year-old daughter, Jote, to take a sari, a traditional Indian dress for women, to the tailor to fix some stitching. Jote pounced at the opportunity excuse to leave the house and have some fun outside, she thought. Jote grabbed the sari and headed to Sector 31, a posh gated community where the tailor had their shop. The glitz and glamour of Sector 31 were all too clear compared to the slums, garbage dumps, and open sewers of Nithari. Sector 31 had 3-story villas which dotted perfectly paved streets and luxury cars parked in spacious garages. But Sector 31 and Nithari were more than 2 different areas. They were 2 separate worlds. Her way into Sector 31, Jote saw a perfectly yellow banana lying on the ground. For Jote, this was a godsend. She scooped up the banana and ran back to her house to give it to her sister, Barty. Jote was ecstatic, screaming, "Look what I found! You can eat half of this banana, and I'll save the other half for Ma." They both laughed as Jote handed Barty the banana and left to go back into Sector 31 to get the sari tailored. Barty didn't know it at the time, but this would be the last time she'd ever see her younger sister. Not soon after, Jabu and his wife started to worry. Jote still hadn't come home. Eventually, their worry grew into fear. It had only been an hour, but they both had a reason to worry. Rumors had been circulating that girls were going missing near Nithari. Acting on his nerves, Jabu fetched his bicycle, called some friends, and set out on a search for his 10-year-old daughter in Sector 31. Soon to follow was Jote's mother. Sweating in the sweltering June sun, Nina darted in and out of stores until she arrived at the tailor's storefront. Although nervous, she felt optimistic the tailor would be able to point her in the direction of her daughter's whereabouts. The tailor had seen Jote, but before Nina could take a sigh of relief, the tailor said Jote left his shop to find another tailor because his stitching machine was broken. Alarm bells immediately sounded in Nina's head. She too had heard the rumors of missing girls. In fact, at this point, everyone in Nithari had heard the rumors. Tracing Jote's path, Nina came across 2 local vendors and asked whether they had seen the 10-year-old daughter. Fortunately, neither had. In her frenzied search, Nina stopped at a house number D5, in Sector 31, a large 3-story mansion which loomed over her like a castle. She approached the owner of the home, Maninder Singh Pander, who was standing by the gate, and asked if he'd seen her daughter. Maninder denied it, but Nina insisted Maninder must have seen something, she thought. But when she pressed him again, he stood his ground, denying any knowledge of the young Jote. At this point, Nina was starting to feel a tad suspicious. That's when she noticed another figure, a man lurking behind Maninder at the gate. He was shorter in stature, almost hidden. His name was Sherndra Kohli, and he worked as Maninder's full-time domestic help. Both of the men denied seeing Jote. Without any proof to the contrary, Nina decided to leave. Jote's parents crumbled. For months, they tried to get the police's attention. They tried filing a missing persons report, but the police denied it. For 6 months, the couple went to the station begging the police to help find their daughter. Every time, they were met with excuses. "She ran away. I'm sure she'll come back," they'd say. But Jote's disappearance wasn't the last one. Missing persons cases racked up in the months following Jote's disappearance. The complaints involved young girls, but the police weren't interested, brushing them off as runaways or lies. Many of the missing children were born to poor immigrant families from other states like Bihar and West Bengal. In the police's mind, these cases were busy work, bearing no fruit and a lot of labor. By December 2005, things were not improving in Nithari. Several children, including Jote, had gone missing. Although no official complaints were filed with the police, Word of the missing children was starting to spread across the city and eventually to the local media. The police had their hands tied and finally started to take some action, questioning people in Nithari and Sector 31 about the missing children. That's when the police realized something interesting. Girls were last seen in the stretch of road before they disappeared. Police immediately started to patrol the stretch, but even with that vigilance, 2 more girls went missing. The 100 meters puzzled the police so much so that they codenamed the area Black Hole because it seemed to suck in children who were never to be found again. So what did the cops think was happening here? Why were these girls disappearing like this? Sure, the cops still haven't taken this as seriously as they should. Their investigation by this point is more of a performance. They haven't filed FIRs or first incident reports, but to their credit, they explored the obvious angle being gangs kidnapping girls. Is that what's happening here? Nithari is a slum area. Girls in this area are susceptible to crimes such as trafficking. If you've seen Slumdog Millionaire, you know all too well about it. So what the cops do is they raid all the brothels and red light areas in a 500-kilometer radius of Nithari. And guess what? They were able to rescue 21 girls. And so, that means this case is closed. But gibber, what's really strange is that none of the girls found were the ones that were missing from Nithari. During the course of these half-hearted gibber by the police, something was discovered that baffled everyone, including the people of Nithari. Next to the 100-meter stretch, Jabber the Black Hole, was a sewer where local boys would play games. One day, when a group was playing Jabber, one of the boys hit the ball into the nearby bushes. When the boys went looking for the ball, they found something they had in a polythene bag which had remains of what looked like a person's hand. People gibber reported the disturbing finding to the police, and guess what they did? Aishwarya did dismissed it as gibber carcasses, and they threw it away. They threw away actual gibber. The police were trying their hardest to not overcomplicate this case, hoping that it would jabber a gang-related kidnapping. But the remains of a hand found in a polythene bag right near where all the gibber went missing was enough evidence to suggest that something way more sinister was happening. Almost a year had gone by since Jote went missing, and the jabber still hadn't found any reliable leads. On top of that, even more children disappeared. 14-year-old Jabber Haldar, 5-year-old Choti Kavita, and 9-year-old Rachna Lal, to name just a few. Although the police had no official leads, the people of Nithari had Jabber generating their own suspicions. Number 1 on their list were the gibber of house number D5 in Sector 31, 52-year-old Maninder Singh Pander and his helper, 36-year-old Shurndra Kohli. Maninder was a wealthy business gibber who jumped between his homes in Chandigarh and Sector 31. From gibber, Shurndra, Maninder's domestic help, traveled to Nithari in the hope of a better life. His wife and 2 children still gibber back home. Maninder also had a family, a wife and a son, but it was known that his marital life was gibber. It was rumored that Maninder was an alcoholic and frequented parties with gibber girls. But what really disappointed the gibber suspicions, on top of everything else, was that Maninder's house was within the 100-meter black hole. All of these suspicions were mere gibber until May 7th, 26. On that day, Maninder asked 22-year-old Pale if she wanted to work at house number D5. I am going to Pander's. He's called me for a job, Pale told her father, Nan Lal, that morning. This wasn't really out of the ordinary. Pale worked at that house pretty often, and her father knew about it. At 4 p.m., Pale left her house and took a rickshaw towards Sector 31. A few hours passed, and Nan Lal was worried. Pale still hadn't come home. He grabbed his phone to give her a call and get an update, but oddly, her phone was switched off. Nan Lal felt that something was off and kept calling relentlessly, only to hear somebody say, "The number you are calling is not reachable. Goodbye." After a few more failed phone calls, Nan Lal's nervousness quickly turned to certainty that something was wrong, very wrong. It was a grueling night for Nan Lal, who waited the whole day and night hoping for his daughter's return. But the cards were not in his favor. This was Nithari, where daughters didn't seem to return. The next day, Pale still hadn't come home, so Nan Lal went to house number D5 to see what he could find. He saw Maninder and confronted him. "Where is my daughter? Where is Pale?" he asked. Maninder's response immediately seemed suspicious. "I don't know any Pale." Nan Lal knew it was a lie. Pale had worked at the house before. He knew something was up, but given his social class, he was in no position to interrogate Munender, a rich business owner from Chandigarh. His next option was the police, but he hesitated going to them, mostly because he feared being ridiculed and dismissed like all the other families of missing children in Nithari. And to no one's surprise, that's exactly what happened. Immediately, the police told him to get lost or bhajia. But Nan Lal wasn't one to quit. He prodded the authorities for months and sought out lawyers to levy pressure. Unlike the parents of other missing victims, Nan Lal had financial resources at his disposal. Pale disappeared in May, but the police didn't file a complaint until October, 5 months after she disappeared. Oh, and the police didn't do this voluntarily. Nan Lal got the chief magistrate to help order the police to file it. After months of begging, urging, and fighting, this was the first FIR filed in this case, and that was after many kids had already gone missing. In the following 5 months, more girls went missing, all in the same 100-meter stretch. One of the many missing girls during that time was 20-year-old Pinky Sarkar, who went missing in August of 2006. When Pinky's parents, Bandana and Jatin Sarkar, went to show a photo of their daughter to the head of Nithari Police, Sub-Inspector Simajit Kaur, the officer said, "Your daughter is good-looking. She must have run away with someone." As you can imagine, Pinky's parents felt humiliated and infuriated. Even after her parents tried to defend her honor, the police mocked them, saying, "Such cases are common among you Bengalis. We have seen it all. Get lost." But once the first FIR was filed, 5 months after Pale went missing and 2 years after the first girl in Nithari went missing, the police finally started to take deliberate action. It was November 26 when Pale's case appeared on Officer Vinod Pandey's desk. Officer Pandey was the head of surveillance in Noida, the largest city which encompasses Nithari. While looking through the case, Officer Pandey noticed a possible lead. Pale's father had tried to call his daughter, which meant that there was a cell phone, and perhaps that cell phone could be traced. Officer Pandey sent out memos to all the telecom companies in India, telling them to highlight Pale's Nokia phone and her MA number, a unique code given to every cellular device in the world. If it popped up on their systems, they would immediately let him know. On top of tracing Pale's cell phone, Officer Pandey thought Nan Lal's interaction with Munender was very suspicious. When he called him in for an interview, Munender denied knowing Pale. This was a peculiar denial, but Munender had an alibi. On the day of Pale's disappearance, Munender said he was in Chandigarh to attend his father's funeral. Officer Pandey was able to check Munender's mobile location and found out that Munender was telling the truth. He was, in fact, in Chandigarh on May 7th, and other sources also corroborated the story. But although Munender's alibi checked out, Officer Pandey still felt uneasy. He kept interrogating Munender, and it was lucky that he did because that's when Munender finally broke. All of a sudden, Munender admitted to knowing about the girls going missing. Not exactly he admitted that he knew Pale because Pale worked at his house. Worked at his house? What exactly does that mean? Pale, you see, was a call girl, and he used to pay her 25,000 rupees to visit him twice a month. So Officer Pandey knew that Munender lied, but there was nothing he could do about it. With no evidence tying Munender to the missing girls, you'd think Officer Pandey had hit a dead end. But then the case had a major breakthrough. Airtel, one of India's largest telecom SIM providers, followed up with Officer Pandey. Pandey notified him that Pale's cell phone had pinged on their radar. This was the moment Officer Pandey was looking for. The police rushed to the phone's ping location, weaving in and out of traffic to find who they thought would be the perpetrator of these terrible kidnappings. They tracked the phone to a rickshaw rider. The police insisted the rider share the whereabouts, but he claimed innocence. He told the police he had recently bought the phone. In this cascade of events unfolding one after the other, Officer Pandey noticed something pivotal. He realized the phone was ringing. If the phone was ringing, then it had to have a SIM card. And if the SIM card wasn't the rickshaw rider's, then it had to be registered to someone else's name. Perhaps that someone else knew something about Pale. Officer Pandey emailed the phone's SIM card number to all the telecom companies in India, asking them to send any details they had about the SIM's registration and ownership. Officer Pandey got a response, a Christmas gift, you might say. A nonchalant, extremely short email blew the case wide open. The email had everything they had been looking for. The email said, Shurndra Kohli, Village Nithari, Sector 31, Noida. Wait, so Pale was the call girl that Muninder used to call, and he confessed to this. So then why would Shurndra Kohli's name show up on the telecom radar? That is exactly what baffled the cops. Muninder had been the prime suspect from day one because of his scandalous lifestyle. Kohli, on the other hand, was this meek, docile character lurking in Muninder's shadows. Another thing to be noted, which was revealed in the investigation, was that Pale's own father used to pimp her out for prostitution. That's why he knew where she was and what she was doing. A barrage of jeeps with sirens wailing swarmed Kohli at house number D5 in Sector 31. There wasn't much Kohli could do. Even if he wasn't involved in Pale's disappearance, the police had enough evidence to arrest him for theft, which was exactly what they did. The police arrested Kohli and brought him in for interrogation. We kept interrogating Kohli until our spirits broke, but he did not break, said Officer Pandy. The man who everybody in the village described as shy turned completely stoic while under interrogation. It took hours of prodding, scaring, and convincing until Kohli finally gave in. He admitted he had murdered Pale and disposed of her body. But the confessions didn't stop there. I'm sorry, but that makes no sense to me. First, he's the shy and puny character. Then he's this brick wall of confidence and mystery. And now all of a sudden he's an open book. This is a book you wouldn't want to read, Ashwin. Yeah, its contents are all too real and all too gory, in fact. Officer Pandy himself said there was something psychotic about Kohli, something about him that he just couldn't wrap his head around. Now that the police had finally broken Kohli, the story was finally filling out. Kohli said he was the one who called Pale to house number D5 because he was infatuated with her. When Pale went to the house, they both sat in the living room. Kohli said he tried to solicit Pale for sex, but she refused. After facing denial, he decided to take a more aggressive route. While fetching some tea for the pair, Kohli went behind Pale and strangled her with her own scarf. Looking to capitalize on his urges, Kohli then said he had sex with Pale's corpse. But if that wasn't disturbing enough, what about all the other missing girls? If he could do that to a grown woman, what about the children? As soon as the police made this connection, they quickly grabbed the missing persons flyer, which had all the children's photos on it, to show to Kohli. One by one, he identified the children and revealed the extent of his atrocities in the black hole. Over the course of 2 years, at least 19 people had gone missing: Rimpa Haldar, Pinky Sarkar, Jote Lal, and Pale, to name a few. Why 19? Why so many? Why girls? Why children? These questions had baffled the cops, but they wished they hadn't asked them. In January or February of 24, I was standing outside D5 when a girl was coming towards Sector 31 from Nithari. Later, I was told her name was Rimpa Haldar. I lured her in, telling her I had candy for her. As she came in, I went behind her and strangled her with her own scarf. After that, I tried to have sex with her, but wasn't able to. So I killed her with my own hands. Why did you kill her? I don't know. There was just this pressure that I had to kill her. There was something within me, I just had to. Then I took her dead body to the bathroom upstairs, and I got a knife from the kitchen. After that, I cut a piece of her arm and her left breast, which I cooked in the kitchen. Then I ate her breast. When I was going through these recordings, Jabber, one thing stood out that shook me to my core. Kohli is on Jibber saying, Maru cartoon cow or kill cut eat. But Aaron, as jabber as this confession is there more than the confession? Something the police were worried about was if Kohli rescinded his confession. The cops had nothing to base their case off of, so they immediately went to D5 to collect more evidence. How did Kohli, in 2 years, dispose of not 1, not 2, but 19 dead bodies with nobody finding out? But technically, people did find out, right? You mentioned the children who were playing cricket and found what looked like a hand wrapped in plastic. Yes, exactly. And that's where Kohli said he'd buried not just the hand, but the heads of all his victims as well. In the course of their investigation, police collected all kinds of evidence, including psychological evidence like polygraph tests, narco-analysis, VR truth serum, and my personal favorite, psychoanalysis. A psychoanalysis was done to determine the level of psychopathy that Kohli was suffering from. It was ruled that Kohli was not a psychopath. So, what happened to Kohli? By December 2006, Kohli was taken into custody, and all hell broke loose. House number D5 was surrounded by hundreds upon hundreds of villagers from Nithari, including the parents of the missing children. Standing outside among a sea of people were Pinky's parents. As they reached D5, they both spotted yellow clothes in the police's evidence pile. Vandana fainted when she saw them because she knew whose clothes they were Pinky's. The clothes she wore the day she disappeared. Aishwarya, I've had nightmares about this case. I wouldn't want to revisit it. Remember how I told you that Kohli beheaded his victims? The police found 19 skulls behind house number D5, some still with hair on them, and the skulls were so small you could tell they were children's. In the course of the investigation, more evidence came up. Clothes, bones, knives, and bodies were uncovered. The Noida police had spectacularly failed Nithari, whose headlines were all over the world. So, on January 9, 2007, the Nithari case was transferred to the Central Bureau of Investigation (CBI), India's national investigating body, on the lines of the FBI in the US. But if this case wasn't twisted enough for you already, Aishwarya, there are more twists to come. Of course there are. But what about the man that owned D5, Muninder Pandey? It seems really implausible to me that someone could bury 19 skulls in my backyard and I would have no idea. Well, Aishwarya, the CBI's theory is that police corruption played a major factor. A CBI investigation found that Inspector Kaur, remember the one who disrespected Pinky's parents, was accepting bribes from Muninder. According to the CBI, though Muninder wasn't paying off the police to cover up any murders or kidnappings, he was trying to hush up his prostitution ring. The CBI concluded Muninder was innocent and gave him a clean sheet. The media didn't care, though. Muninder had already been painted a demon by the masses, and no amount of evidence could vindicate him. The public's hate for Muninder grew so strong that every time he visited the court, despite police protection, mobs managed to beat him black and blue. Khalid Khan, the lawyer for the families of missing children, believed Muninder's involvement went much deeper than simply soliciting prostitution. He argued that 19 skulls couldn't have just popped up in Muninder's backyard without him knowing about it. But above this circumstantial evidence, Khan said that he had potentially game-changing evidence that would tie Muninder to the crime. On the day of Kohli's arrest, Khan claimed that Muninder had written a confession to the crimes and that he was in possession of it. This was a bombshell claim that Muninder obviously denied. Muninder also had the CBI backing him up, dismissing the confession as evidence. But when the case finally hit the courts, Muninder was not so lucky. Even though the CBI's charge sheet had Sherndra as the lone suspect responsible for the crimes in Nithari, the Allahabad High Court was not convinced. A last-minute twist changed the outcome of the verdict. The judge allowed Khan to submit Muninder's confession to the police as actual evidence and rejected the CBI's charge sheet, finding both Sherndra and Muninder guilty of the Nithari mass murders. Their punishment: hanging, something their victims would have gladly chosen over being killed, cut, and eaten.